Universal Monsters, but some idiot, the illustration they used for the article. Now, okay, you're doing an article on the classic Universal Monsters. What do you think you'd use as a photo? Boris Karloff, Bela Lugosi, right? No,
Claude Rains. It is, yeah.
Christopher Lee is Dracula.
Oh, that's Universal. You know?
Coolest person really just Google Dracula. Okay, guy in a cape, fine. No. The article was specifically about the Universal horror movies, and they used a photo from
Lon Chaney. Come on, somebody. Lon Chaney Jr. even.
Research.
Yeah.
And I love camera films too, but it's like, no, did you not know that? No. Christopher Lee was never in the universe. Those were 30 years later. That's like,
I know.
Star Trek, Star Wars, it's all the same, right? Just put him over. A guy in a cape. What the hell?
I love the Hammer films. We try to watch one a week. I found one the other night that was Asian zombies or Asian vampires. Yeah, Asian vampires, but it was very weird. But it had Christopher Plummer in it. And it was good.
Still.
I like those. They used to scare me as a kid. Just Saturday afternoons, they'd have the reruns, and that's when I got to see the Universal Monsters and Shock Theater and the Hammer films.
We had Nightmare Theater every Friday night in Seattle when I was growing up. So
it's better at night.
So what else about like the episode that we like about the episode? About the City of the Edge of Forever.
Well, one thing I thought occurred to me last night while watching it is, honestly, it's funny to realize now the 1930 setting, that wasn't as far removed from audiences of the time. It's looking back, long Clark Gable. That was only 30 years previous to people in 1966 watching that episode. Right. And World War II and all that talk about Hitler and the V-2 rockets, that was in their lifetime for a lot of the audience members, So
and some of the cast members that fought in wars.
Yeah, exactly. Scotty. Richard Matheson, who wrote The Enemy Within, he fought in the Battle of the Bulge. A lot of these people other people on the staff were veterans of the war, so that always sort of.
Oh yeah.
And even going back, I guess I guess the Great Depression would have been one era before them. They would have grown up hearing about the Great Depression from their parents.
Right. It was very fresh for their parents. Like that was just like yesterday for them.
Yeah, it affected my grandparents for the rest of their lives. Their behavior about saving everything. My grandmother had a drawer full of bread ties and just things like that. Plastic bags, she'd save, paper bags. She says, "Well, I might need it."
Well, I looked it up. Harlan Ellison was born in 1934, so yeah, he was actually born 4 years after. For us, it's like, wow, they're going back to the distant 1930s. It's like, no, that was, that episode takes place 4 years after Harlan Ellison was born. It was time, So you probably heard about New York City 1930s,
Right. Yeah. I thought they did overall a good job representing that time period. And, like we just said, that wasn't too far removed from when this episode aired, so.
About a generation.
Yeah, a generation.
And we learned that sections of New York City look frighteningly familiar to Mayberry, RFD.
Right.
Use what you can.
Yeah. Who would have thought, 50 years later, that footage, would be interspliced in a promotion on MeTV to advertise the Andy Griffith Show, that CBS had acquired, Star Trek and had Andy Griffith. And I mean, I just think that's funny.
I think Mayberry got recycled in Miri too, again.
Yes, I think so.
Much more run down and post-apocalyptic. Okay. That's apocalyptic Mayberry. Okay.
Mayberry had a wild Saturday night one night,
Yeah. But I want to ask this question though to the group. So, but the guy who took McCoy's, weapon and then, vaporized himself, do you think that possibly could have had some type of impact? I mean, who knows who this guy was or anything? I don't know. But do you think that could have had a possible impact in the timeline? That maybe it's not as impactful as Edith dying. I was just a random thought because because like we did have another death in this episode, and I thought I'd give this guy like a kudos here. Like, hey, he did die. Do you think?
Right, because he could have killed somebody later, or save somebody later,
or maybe he died 24 hours later.
He got hit by a car.
He was a thief. He was a thief.
He may have gotten killed 24 hours later, so the ripples were not that severe.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, it was just a random thought of mine. Like, why not? Like, look at that.
Given they make such a big deal about if you kill one person, it changes everything. I guess this guy was
just a random,
less historically significant.
Well, he dropped that milk bottle. Remember?
Yeah.
Where's that milk supposed to go? I mean, that could have changed
a milk bottle.
It could have been spoiled milk and killed somebody, and now they're alive.
Yeah.
There you go. Let's go down the rabbit hole.
Oh gosh.
Guys, we don't
know. Yesterday, at first we think that Captain Christopher, we've looked you over, you're historically insignificant. And then they find, oh wait, your kid went to Saturn. Okay, never mind. We have to put you back. I guess. Milk bottle guy did not have a kid who went to Saturn. Okay,
Yeah.
That episode where that's mentioned, Spock actually, you could almost see it in Spock's face, like, I didn't check about descendants. Like scene there where he has like a glimmer of recognition, and then later on we find out, oops, like even Spock can make a mistake. Like
yeah.
Oh, even Spock kicks himself in this episode for not immediately turning on his tricorder when the.
Yeah, he did.
I'm a fool. I should have been recording all this history.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. And I love the look on Spock's face. Talking about Spock here for a few minutes. I like the look on Spock's face when the Guardian is like, oh, you're primitive. Like, oh, really? You're sign like you basically kind of the Guardian just like kind of mocking Spock, and and like Spock just has this moment like, who are you? Like I thought that was just kind of funny. It was just like a very subtle, like, like this intrigues me. And then also like as we mentioned earlier about how Spock was talking about the lack of technology. What's the term he used?
Stone knives and bear skins.
Yeah, and bear skins. I thought that was hilarious. And maybe it's just me, and I'm a huge Gilligan Islands fan as well. But it made me feel like Spock was Professor working with coconuts. Because the Professor always made the technology with the coconuts and everything. It just felt that way with me with Spock with all these tubes and everything. It's like, this is Star Trek's version of working with coconuts. That's just me.
Yeah.
And Spock was occasionally a bit clueless when he goes, oh, excuse me, Captain, I need 6 pounds of platinum.
Yeah, exactly. And Kirk
we're making 17 cents an hour. You're not getting 6 pounds of platinum,
That would raise some questions if they asked for it. Like what was it Sheldon ordered on Big Bang when he was little? He ordered something and the FBI came to his house.
Right.
I liked it. What I didn't, excuse me. Oh, I noticed that she wore the same dress a couple of times. And then her outfit would be different because I always look at clothes. And then she wore more of a 20s hat. But then when she died, when she was going out with him, it's like she pulled out her best, most newest, which was later 20s going into 30, the style, because things had changed. And she had that pretty cape on. She was really dressing up for her young man. And I just never knew why she didn't look before crossing that road. Of course, she was concerned because here when Dr. McCoy came in, he was sick. She didn't know what was wrong with him, but she just put her arm around him, helped him to bed because she was such a caring person.
Well, there does seem to be kind of a predestination paradox thing going on where, in fact, it turns out the reason she gets hit by a truck is because she turns around and notices this confusion and drama with, Spock and McCoy and Kirk, and that's why she doesn't see the truck. So it's like, oh God, it was, there's some sort of weird predestination paradox thing going on here where would she have been hit, I guess we're supposed to assume she got hit naturally otherwise before McCoy messed with time, but as it plays out, the reason she gets distracted is she's actually across the street. She turns around to go back to find out what the hell is going on with all the drama with, Leonard McCoy, stay here,
Right.
And it's actually the time travel and mess conflict that causes her to not pay attention and get hit by the truck,
Right.
If there's anything that anyone could change about the episode, what would it be?
Anything to change? Interesting question, Danny.
Yeah, that is a good question, Dan.
Well, the obvious, I wouldn't want her to die because I'm just
But then we
that
would have
way. I know. But still, I wouldn't want to be in that situation. Like when, if you had to pick, if your kids were in danger and you had to pick one, what would you do? And
people occasionally complain about Aurora's line about "I'm frightened, Captain," but honestly, for all the people harp on that one, honestly, in context, it's actually not that bad. She's not freaking out during a crisis on the bridge. She's just found out that their entire universe has been wiped out.
Yeah.
I think "Hi, Captain, I'm concerned" is not with that.
Right, that doesn't carry enough weight to be concerned.
But I think she says she's frightened, but it's sexism. Well, no, I think in this case she doesn't break down. She doesn't go into hysterics. But I think it's in context. Again, I suppose if you wanted to rewrite it, you could take out the line because people occasionally grumble about that line about when it goes.
It wasn't like she clung to him, like "Save me, Captain." She looked to her leader.
Yeah, exactly.
For support.
But people occasionally, when you hear discussions about 60s era sexism, you see that people citing that line, and actually in context, it's not all that bad. It's not like she has hysterics or clings to Captain. She just sort of, oh dear. I think it's a very good comment.
I think sometimes people just want something to complain about, and to me that diminishes when there's something valid. Don't nitpick.
But sure. I suppose if you were to rewrite it now, you could change that around. But
I love the part where even at the very end, and I think it's the first time that we hear Kirk say "hell" on the show, and it just came out so valid, genuine for him to say, like he'd had it. He was like, just let's get the hell out of here. Like we could relate to that because he had just been through this emotional ringer, and all that. And it turned out the way it was supposed to, but still at great cost. And he was just like, let's get the hell out of here.
Right. And the show is smart enough to let it end there. It doesn't give us a scene back on the bridge where, okay, well, now everything's better and we're now going to have some, humorous banter between Spock and McCoy to sort of ease us out. No, that would have been whiplash to suddenly go back to happy talk on the bridge, which some Star Trek episodes do, where, okay, now.
Right.
I remember as a child, it made me sad, and as an adult, I understood it. I didn't like it any better. It's funny, when you watch Star Trek as a kid, then when you go back as an adult, those old episodes, and even though you see some things that's corny, a lot of the stories were so good. And you can overlook the technology, because you have to go, but that Star Trek, it was so cheesy. I said, but that's all they had, and that was cutting edge back then. You got to appreciate that.
Right.
And we didn't see the cheesiness,
No,
cheesy.
I still don't. I love it.
Right. And Kim, just to speak on that piece, just super quick, that I was watching this episode as a kid, I saw it one way, and now being a social worker, I can see it like a different way.
Exactly.
So you can see it like a little differently. It's like, oh, that's something I wouldn't have picked up on, obviously when I was a kid, to compare to now.
Your life experiences, will change.
Yes, exactly.
Same with books. You read a book that you've not read in a long time. So I was like,
you become more nuanced in your viewing and thinking.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. It's funny. I'd like to go back and tell my 16-year-old self some things.
I don't know, even when I was a kid watching the show, sometimes some of the love story stuff is like, oh, this is the mushy stuff. Get back to fighting the giant lizard, but now I can appreciate watching some of the episodes and the character stuff and
I would have liked to see more.
Where's the giant lizard? Damn it! Okay,
I know Uhura and Sulu and even Scotty were more background characters a lot, but I liked it when they got to do something. I would have liked to seen Uhura or Sulu have more of a, a love story or something.
A role.
I'd like to think the show had lasted 5 years. we would have got it. There is no Eurocentric episode. There is no.
Even Scotty got one with lots of
Lights of Zatar. Yeah.
yes.
He also got a quasi love story in Who Mourns for Adonis too.
Yeah.
True. And he liked the chick at the pub and Wolf in the Fold.
No, that didn't end well. Okay.
No, it would have been a short-lived romance, but yeah.
Yeah, it was part of it was less of an ensemble show than the modern stuff. But yeah, if one could one could wish they could have done more with Sulu and Yura and some of the characters. And who knows, if they had ran 5 years, maybe we would have gotten around to them doing a Sulu themed episode.
Well, this episode was written by Harlan Ellison with DC Fontana and an uncredited, Gene L. Kuhn too. So you kind of wonder who put in what, because it was supposed to be much different. It was not supposed to be the classic that it was, but it became, I know
there's been endless scholarship and practically entire books written on that subject, and I don't claim to be an authority on who did what, but yeah, that's been very sort of well documented and covered, and Harlan's had his version, and there.
So Dan said that because you can't really hear him right now, that he thought that the ending of the original version of the script was interesting, with Kirk attempting to save Keeler but being prevented. So he likes that aspect of it.
I think in the end, I think they made the right call that it's Kirk's decision rather than him being just sort of passively prevented. It's
made it more poignant.
Yeah. That kind of builds to that moment and that choice, and and.
I'm going to have to dig my James Blish book out and see which ending they use, because sometimes his stuff was a little different because he had to go by the script he was sent.
And not the final product all the time.
Right. Yeah, because there was a good one with the one with Apollo, and Carolyn Palamas was pregnant at the end in the James Blish. He said he's got to sit up in a maternity ward or something.
And then Standards of Practices was not going to let that fly.
No.
Even though it perfectly fit with, say, Greek gods, as we all know. So that's very much, their MO.
I even felt sorry for him, I was very sentimental as a child. As an adult, I'm a hard ass, so
No, that's meant to be a bit poignant there at the end, But
I don't think I'd have changed anything, really.
Yeah.
I think when when I was saying changing, it didn't have to be something big or something. Like some of you said, oh, the ending this, or dialogue that. I think just looking at, and not even looking at it as a here I am, a modern audience, or like myself, I was someone who didn't see the original Star Trek until a little bit later. I'm not going to say much later. And so trying not to look at it with a modern eye or anything like that. It's just more of a thought of, what, really wish they would have changed the outfits or, anything like that. But sometimes you do look back at episodes and you're like, I really wish they would have made this choice, or I would have made that choice. So Greg, I would ask you, as a writer, has there ever been something that you have written where later on you were like, man, I wish I could have really made a different choice?
Oh, I'm sure I must have. Now I'm suddenly on the spot trying to think of it.
Dialogue.
Now I'll say I don't tend to reread my own stuff. If I'm going to sit down and read a book, I'm going to read a book I haven't read, not a book that I spent countless hours reading. But usually by the time a book is published, I never want to read it again. But I read it and reread it and edited it and proofread it.
I reread your stuff.
I think there's stuff that my first DS9 book, I honestly, in retrospect, don't think I gave Cisco enough to do. And likewise, my first Voyager book, I don't think I gave Janeway enough to do. There was a period there where I was having trouble figuring out how to write the captains. Because in theory, if the captains are doing their job, they're delegating, they're just sitting in a room telling people to do all the other interesting stuff. And, this is why I like writing Kirk, because you don't have to worry about those Kirk, because it's just a standard. The Kirk is going to just rush in there, and he's not going to delegate. But yeah, there was a period there when I was struggling to figure out how to, handle. How do you make the captains look in charge and competent? Because if they're actually getting in danger, it looks like they're kind of dropping the ball here. But on the other hand, they're just the authority figure sitting on the bridge, telling people to do things. So yeah, I would zero in on the supporting characters. I think I kind of neglected Cisco. I think I neglected Janeway and decided I'm going to write about Quark and Odo, and because I can't figure out what to do with the guy in the top desk, because they're just the guy who delegates. That's not fun. I want to write about,
I mean, who wouldn't want to write about Quark? I mean, come on.
I've since learned the trick.
Oh, that'd be fun.
I've since learned that the trick is to get the captain off the bridge as fast as humanly possible and get them beamed down to the planet and to a swamp full of alligators or something. Otherwise, they're just sitting around talking to a screen, and I'm not a big fan of writing talking head scenes where everybody's just sort of sitting around a conference table talking. Those aren't fun to write.
What? They're so exciting to read.
I think in hindsight, I probably could have done. And I mean, when we also our first DS9 book, I remember this goes back in time. We had no idea what to do with Dax. At that point, I argued Dax did not get a discernible personality until season 2.
Yes,
I remember she was like, okay, we could not wrap our heads around this character. Because I remember we started out writing that book. All we had was the Bible and the script for the first episode, and we could not get it. Okay, Kira, I got her character. I got Dax. We could not figure out, to the point where I remember we actually turned in the first draft, and Dax did nothing in the book, and he said, you have to put Dax in the book. You have to give her things to do. Okay, fine, but. I will, like I said, in retrospect, if you're looking for a great Dax book, don't read ours. At that point in time, we did not figure out what to do with Dax, and like I said, I would argue partly I don't think the show really figured out what to do with Dax until season 2, and we were writing that book during season 1. So yeah, it was the Dax book. Okay.
As someone who's Deep Space Nine is my favorite, that's my go-to.
Mhm.
I could concur with the Dax, and Dax is actually my favorite character, but she's very her character does not make sense personality wise in the first season. Then all of a sudden in the second one, you're like, oh, personality. It's kind of like one moment she's this, the next moment she's that, next moment she's horned up for no reason, then she's not horned up for any reason, then she's above this, and then above that, then she's below this. So that's kind of it. It's interesting to do.
I'll admit that we could not get a handle on Dax when we were writing that book. I know I didn't have a handle. Kira, okay, freedom fighter, chip on her skull, got that.
Massive.
Fine. Quark, okay, he's easy.
Quark.
We know where he's coming from. Yeah, like I said, that's a case where I didn't know what Dax.
Fantastic.
And I even remember in my Q books that was my first attempt.
Yay!
My first attempt at writing a trilogy. Pacing, it was different. In the second book, there's some padding in the second book, I say in all honesty, because I kind of realized, oh God, I don't have enough plot for this. Trying to stretch a plot. I have the beginning and the ending, and oh my God, I kind of had to vamp a bit in the middle. Okay, I thought, I don't have enough plot here to,
I think that'd be interesting, writing for a character that's omnipotent, that's pretty much can do anything, that it would be hard to figure out, without a little fluff in the middle.
Yeah.
So thinking of
There's
that,
no limits.
There are no limits. So is there a character, not just in Star Trek, just all over, that was probably your hardest character to have to write for, in a book?
Well, like I said, Dax, we struggled with on Deep Space Nine. That's because I don't think the show had figured out who she was yet. Not my fault.
Yeah.
Okay.
As a supporting character, within the story, she didn't really do much on her own. I was watching Duet the other night, and she gave a few words of support to Kira during that, but she didn't get to really stand out much on her own. So
I remember being frustrated even in the first season of DS9 on going back to Dax when they did an episode about Dax. It was titled Dax. And she's in the coma the whole episode. It's like, they did an episode about Dax. It was because that was when they stole her trio or something. It's like, well, The episode about Dax doesn't actually have much.
Dax is not. It's more about the symbiote Dax and not Dax.
I was sort of watching that episode, hoping I would learn more about Dax. Than well, she's sick and in a coma and dying most of the episode.
Yeah.
Poor Dax.
And her trill has been put into somebody else, so I'm learning nothing about Dax here. Okay, So
Could be because at the time they had no idea what to do with trills, because you saw trills in, Next Generation, and they did not look like Dax.
No.
And then all of a sudden you have a trill here, and they're like, wait, that's a trill? So that could be probably an interesting writing composition of questions when you change what a character looks like, and then now you don't understand what that personality of this character is now needs to be, since probably their whole dichotomy of maybe the Bible had changed into what trills were. Maybe
they're still kind of working on figuring out how the whole symbiont thing
works.
Mm-hmm.
They're still kind of developing into Discovery now for finding new ways.
Yeah.
I like what you did with number 1 in that Legacy series, the Captain to Captain.
Yes.
That was so good.
Hey, like I said, I'm going to brag forever about the fact that we got to give her name.
Yes.
Yeah.
Although this is where I always mention that actually Dave Mack came up with that name. I just got to be the one who used it first because my book came before his. But Dave Mack was the one who came up with that name when we were plotting that trilogy. It pops up first in my book because I got to write book 1. So
yes,
right.
But like that's our Hikaru Sulu moment. We will treasure that forever. That
There you go. Awesome.
I actually went out. If I told this story, I actually went up to Anson Mount at a convention once.
Beautiful.
I actually said, hey, this is a weird question, but okay. In the penultimate episode, did you actually call number 1 Una? Because I think you called number 1 Una. He goes, oh yeah, that was the line in the script. I go, thank God, straight from the horse's mouth.
So that you know what
we gave her that name. Thank you. I'm not sure he understoed, but okay.
No, he probably okay.
But
Okay,
yeah, I had it straight from the horse's mouth. He said, oh yeah, that was the line. So. I cannot hear you, Dan.
Sorry,
Dan, can you
type it in, and then we'll say it again.
Yeah, Dan has audio issues, so he'll type it in what he's trying to say.
Yeah.
So fantastic. So that's an exciting thing to be able to name a character, because there's a lot of characters in Star Trek where you realize you either only know either a first name or a title or just a last name, and it's kind of an exciting aspect when all of a sudden you're like, oh, I know more about this character, like a name that you would never, I guess something that you wouldn't think would be something so spectacular, but that is that. Sorry,
I'm using now to see merchandise that features Nichelle Nichols, like the Hallmark ornament, where she's identified as Nyota, even though that name was never used on, when Nichelle Nichols was playing the character.
Right.
Retroactively, she is now Nyota Ayura forever, even though the name did not appear until it appeared in the books. It was used for 3 years, but it didn't become canon until they finally used it with Zoe Saldana,
Oh, yes. I'm glad she finally got a first name too.
It took 2009.
Yeah. Dan said there, read that.
I've seen an interview with Una McCormack where she said the character was named after her.
Yes, it was, to some degree. I mean, to some degree, we were having fun playing off Una number 1.
Yeah.
It was also a tip of the hat to our colleague, Una McCormack, so.
I'm like, so she's going to get a last name one day?
Like I said, it's up to the show to determine this. My take on it is that no, Una is her name.
It's her name.
Like Quark is, what's Quark's last name? Or Odo, or people ask me what's her last name. As far as
Una,
my idea is Una. We, of course, Strange New World is going to tell us we're going to learn a whole lot more about this character than we ever know. So,
all right, cool.
So.
That's what I like about the books, because even though a lot of it's not canon, still, in my mind, it fills in all these empty spots.
And stuff does occasionally creep from the books into the show. Like I said, Sulu's first name, Hikaru, came from Rhonda McIntyre for one of her novels, and we used it in the books for years before, again, it didn't become official until they finally used it in Star Trek VI, the movie.
I liked it. Yeah, I just noticed a lot of authors that I really like of Star Trek books. They do try to tend to use stuff that other authors use to give some type of continuity, and I like that. When you read some of the really old books, the little thin ones, none of them match. Everything is just like they go on their own way of what they want to do. I never did like that Fate of the Phoenix and the one that went with it, because they just seem so off the wall to me. But I still read them. I have them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, there's something I'm sorry, if somebody else has already come up with a name for this character, why should I come up with a different name? And
right. Or where they're from, or that if they have a sister, like Scotty's sister's in one of the novelizations of a film, and I like that, and it goes into more about not Peter Kirk. I'm sorry. Scotty's nephew, the one that died. He goes back to Earth for the funeral, and his sister locks herself in her pottery shed, and his niece is there, Peter's sister. She's an engineer. And I like that, even though it was not real, because it's not ever in a movie or a TV show. It just gives me, the characters seem more real to me, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. If you got a good author. When I'm reading one of Greg's books, not to kiss up, I feel like you're writing for me, because I have no trouble just getting right into the book, and like the eugenics wars. Gosh, that opened up a whole new aspect to me on everything. Creep me out, but still.
I did my homework, like I said, when I used Robert April in the Legacy Trilogy. No, yeah, I went back and looked at what Diane Carey had previously done with the character. I didn't start from scratch. Diane Carey had already written 2 novels about Robert April and his crew. So rather than reinvent the wheel,
right,
I wrote Robert April, whom we know next to nothing about, as I took my cues from what Diane Carey had established in her books,
I think that's nice.
And when I went back to Sarpedon in one of my other books, which is the All Our Yesterday Planet, I went back and looked at A.C. Crispin's novels that she'd set on that planet, because might as well, we're not obliged, especially back in the old days, we weren't obliged to do that, but it's professional courtesy kind of thing,
Yeah, and it just gives you a continuity, because when I look at, I'm sentimental, but when I see an episode of Star Trek or a movie, sometimes I feel like I'm visiting family. I don't like everybody. I tolerate some of them, and some of them I just love, and it's just nice to have a visit. When you read a book, it's like that. I get my bowl of popcorn. I get a well-worn Star Trek novel, because I just reach in one of my bookcases and pull one, and then I'm good for an hour. My husband will come and sit down and want to talk, and then I said, honey, I'm eating popcorn, because when he's there, it's like one little piece, real delicate, ladylike, and when he's not there, I read my book going, I know that's personal, but it's just, he teases me about that. He says I'm like a rabid wolf with popcorn.
I think we all are.
Can't be delicate with popcorn. Shove it in your mouth.
Yep, that's what it's for.
I end up with popcorn all around my feet. I don't know, having to vacuum afterwards. I don't know how it happens.
How did I miss my mouth? It's
right. Sometimes you just want to take your head and go.
Just throw it at your face and then see where it lands.
Yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah.
Catch some in the book. I'm just kidding.
I have found stuff in books, like a smear of cheese dip, or maybe a popcorn kernel. It's embarrassing.
I'm careful when I'm reading a library book, not
fingers all Cheeto dust everywhere.
Yeah, don't eat Cheetos while you're reading a library book.
Yeah. That's the worst thing to eat is Cheetos when you're trying to read a book. And you have all these thumbprints.
I would not recommend.
Because you eat it and you wipe your hands on your pants, and then you eat some more, and you get up and you've got orange dust all over your leg.
Well, I definitely have been enjoying this conversation, because it's always a really great way to get, especially a writer's perception, when they either look at other works, or they're revisiting works of their own, and to have just a great dialogue to understand how sometimes we may see something and miss something because we're not in the same mindset. But definitely, hey, Greg, where can we find you when you're not talking to us?
Okay, well, I don't have a huge social media presence, honestly, because I'm old. But
You're not old. You're seasoned.
but
Right.
I hang out a lot on the internet, on Facebook. A lot of the Star Trek, fan groups, especially ones that focus on literary Star Trek or Star Trek book discussion groups. There's a Facebook page, Constellation, which is a virtual science fiction convention for all of us who have not been to a convention in over a year. And
I was
hang
supposed to be at one.
and this is probably the longest drought I've had since the early '80s in terms of conventions. But
Yeah.
so the Trek. There's the Trek bulletin boards and things. Trek PBS, Constellation, which is on Facebook, and lots of Trek fan groups. I hang out and talk, especially the ones that are more book oriented. There's actually a generous amount of sort of Star Trek book fan groups on Facebook that I sort of pop in and check on, obviously, especially when I have a new book out. Okay.
Of course. And
I was like,
do you have any books or anything that you have coming out that we know? So you can prize out?
The most recent one came out in November. That is
there it is.
Contest of Principles. It came out in November, which is now a few months away.
Okay.
And that's the most recent Star Trek novel. Hey,
Okay,
there you go.
good job.
I haven't got that one yet. I want to get it.
Yeah.
So definitely, everyone, check it out. Support. Because
Definitely.
that's how we keep things going.
You do?
Will you be coming out with any more Q books? Because I'm a huge Q fan.
She wants all the Q.
What's her Q?
Not that kind of Q.
I don't know if anything currently in the works, but who knows? Like I said, there's more Trek books coming out. Like I said, they just announced Wonderlands by Una McCormick, who, as you know, Captain Commander Una is named after. She's got the new Discovery novel coming out. I know Christopher Bennett just recently announced that he's got a new Star Trek novel coming out.
And that Discovery one, that's about like Michael Burnham's 1 year.
Yeah, her year.
I am looking forward to that. I am.
Called Wonderlands.
Wonderlands. Okay.
And I can't remember. Chris Bennett's got a new one, which I think Christopher's new one is set somewhere between, I think, the motion picture Wrath of Khan or something. So it's set in the movie era. And so I know Dave Mack got them coming out soon. So and there's been a number of announcements. So I coy here because Simon Schuster likes to make the announcements themselves. So
of course.
And with much
any toes.
Here's our exciting new list. So we keep our mouths shut until stuff is officially announced. But but that's some of the exciting new projects coming up.
All right, that's cool. Awesome.
When you did your Child of Two Worlds, I went and booked $1,000,000 to buy it, and my brother was with me, who's a snarky little snot. I'll just say that now. He's not changed. And I was trying to be really cool and say, yes, I know this author. He's very famous for Star Trek. And my brother said, oh, excuse me, you dropped that name. Let me pick it up for you. and embarrassed me. But I was trying to promote you, which of course you didn't need it. And I was trying to read it in the car, and everybody was wanting to talk. And I said, look, I have a new Star Trek book. I know this guy on Facebook now, even though we haven't met. So let me enjoy my moment here. It was a good book.
That was a Pike novel, yes. That was a Pike era novel featuring. And that was a book. It's things you learn. In that was set back in Pike's career with number 1 again. And that's before we named her Una. At that point, I just called her number 1 because that's what they did in the TV show. And I will remember now when we did the Legacy Trilogy, I was one of the people who was lobbying very heavily for we need to give her a name because I'd written one entire damn book without mentioning her name, and that was a headache. It's like, no, we are not going to have to be able to write an entire damn trilogy about this character without mentioning her name. It does feel occasionally weird, a number,
I wish they could have kept her at the TV show because I thought she was a great character.
But I do remember that Dave Mack came up with the name, but I was very aggressively, we need to give her a name, because I'm not going to do this again. Okay.
All right.
There was also talk that, for those who don't know, in the Legacy trilogy, we take her from being a sort of like a young ensign to being a captain. So it makes sense to call her number one when she's
not number one anymore.
Ensign number one, captain number one. That didn't make sense.
Right.
Yeah, I better lobby. Comes back to me now. We need to give her a name. We're going to write a book about her that takes her from being an ensign to a captain. We have to give her a name. It will be an endless headache to try to somehow write around not giving her name for 1,000 pages.
It's a good series.
Yeah.
Now I got to read it again. It's been a year.
Well, Greg, we thank you so much for joining us today. And everyone, so don't forget, everyone, to check out some of Greg's wonderful works. Support all arts because it's fantastic.
Right.
And we thank you guys for joining us on the Scotch Trekker. Even though Dan the Scotchman is up there, he does say hi and bye. And don't forget, we'll be back next Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. GMT, with Star Trek Discovery Science Advisor Mohammed Noor. You guys go out there, have a great time, live long and prosper, and all the goodness. And we'll see you again soon.
Bye.
See ya.
Okay.